Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg with the always scintillating John Daly. How you doing, John?
I'm good, Bernie. How are you doing?
Good. I want to start today with the gift that keeps on giving for the Republican Party. Zoran Mamdani, the socialist, Marxist, whatever you want to call him, social democrat is how he ran, who won the New York primary race for mayor of New York City. The question is the Democratic Party big enough to take in a radical like Mamdani? The danger, of course, for Democrats is if mainstream Democrats endorse him, they risk losing the establishment that finds Mamdani way too radical. If they don't endorse him, they risk losing the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, the Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wing. So what's a good Democrat to do? What do you think, John?
Well, this is an interesting discussion because I saw online last week a little back and forth between two somewhat prominent Democrats. So I figured I'd read these because I think it really sort of lays this out well. So Democratic Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, he's apparently thinking about running for president in 2028. So this makes this especially relevant. But he tweeted about Mamdani. This is him. It's weird that a big tent Democrat wouldn't include. I'm sorry. It is weird that a big tent Democratic Party wouldn't include the guy who just handily won the Democratic primary in the city with the most Democratic voters in America. Hashtag voters matter. And then former Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips responded to him online. Phillips, some may recall, was the lone Democratic voice during the presidential primary early on, who was shouting from the rooftops that Biden wasn't fit to run for re-election. He even tried unsuccessfully to primary Biden. He wrote in response to Murphy, "It's weird you were quiet when we all knew Biden can neither beat Trump nor serve another term. And it's weird you're now loud when a 33-year-old with no management or executive experience who favors seizing the means of production and opening government grocery stores to compete with small businesses aspires to be the chief executive of the largest city in America. Yes, 1 in 10 New York Democrats voted for him, and their wishes must be honored. But the 90% who did not are more representative of the American electorate you'd be facing if your presidential dreams come true. Hashtag truth matters." I think that pretty much lays out the internal debate, but it's interesting, Bernie, that Murphy, who has more on the line here, would kind of come to Mamdani's aid.
Yeah, I think Murphy just made a mistake. There's no question that he's running for president. You know how you know, by the way? You start to see people popping up on cable TV more than they normally popped up on cable TV. You say, wait, why is he on again? because
That's true.
he's running for president, that's why. And there are a number of others, which we'll get to as we get closer to the 2028 election, I guess. Look, I'm with Dean Phillips on this one. I think it's a mistake. It isn't just that Mamdani's a socialist. And even though as mayor of New York, the city doesn't have a foreign policy, he could feel any way he wants about Israel, and he's not going to do anything about it. But he is really not a fan of Israel. And that's something the National Democratic Party has to decide. Are they going with the progressive wing that isn't a fan of Israel? Or are they going with older, more mainstream, more establishment Democratic voters? An editorial in the Wall Street Journal had this line: will Chuck Schumer, who of course is the Senate Democratic minority leader, will Chuck Schumer endorse Zoran Mamdani for mayor of New York? That's a straightforward question, but the senator from New York hasn't given a straightforward answer. Yeah, exactly. The smile tells it all, John. They're trying to walk a tightrope, and one wrong step on a tightrope, and you fall a long way and you get hurt. And I think Democrats are I hate using cliches, but they are between that proverbial rock and a hard place.
No, I think that's true, and I think you lay that out well. I don't think it's a great idea at the national level. I mean, if you're a New York politician, you can probably get away with siding with Mamdani, but yeah, at the national level, I do think it poses a danger for the Democratic Party, and it'll be interesting to see. Like you said, Schumer really hasn't said much at this point, but there's other high-profile. Murphy, I'm surprised he came out and said something, but it'll be interesting to see what others that plan on running in 2028 come out and say. If they should at least be asked about it. I think it's a very valid question.
Well, let's see if Murphy stands by what he said, or if he says, that's not entirely what I said, what I meant to say. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll see what happens with that. But I think Zoran Mamdani, if he had his way, would turn the economic system of New York City and the United States of America right on its head. I, he was asked flat out, do you like capitalism? He flat out said, no, I don't.
Yeah, no, he has a lot of people have looked into a lot of his old tweets that were even more provocative than a lot of the stuff he said in public, and those are coming to light. And I think it's all fair game. You know, it's all worth paying attention to and worthy of skepticism.
The real danger, it seems to me, before we move on, John, is that the energy of the National Democratic Party is not with Chuck Schumer.
That's true.
It's with AOC, and she may primary Chuck Schumer, so that's why he hasn't decided yet. He's got to hope he meets with Mamdani, and they come to some kind of wishy-washy accommodation where Mamdani says, here's my position on Israel, here's my position on the economy of New York, and Schumer can either get on board or reject it flat out, because you can't stay on the fence forever on this. And let's move on.
Sure. I was just going to say, I do wonder if they're going to try to do with Mamdani what they did with Kamala Harris when she was running for president, sort of try to erase the past statements she had made and just drop those positions like you know at a moment's notice. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, the Republicans won't let that. They may try.
Right.
They may try, but the Republicans won't let that happen. Let's move on. ICE agents have come under attack recently, physical attack. They've been the subject, they've been on the wrong end of people throwing rocks at them. One person who's on video had a gun, took aim at them while he was running away. The danger, the question I want to raise is left-wing rhetoric contributing to the violence? Before we try to answer that question, whoever throws a rock at an ICE agent or hits an ICE agent, that's the person responsible. If some crazy left-winger is using the wrong language, that may contribute to an atmosphere in which this happens, but the proximate cause of the violence is the person committing the violence. That said, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, at a University of Minnesota Law School commencement address, said Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping up folks off the streets. They're in unmarked vans wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. Let me just say something about the masks. I would prefer that they not wear masks, but that's only if the other side doesn't take pictures of them and then list their home address on some website and then hassles them at home and hassles their wives and hassles their children. That's why they're wearing masks. And the other thing about masks, Tim Walz and a lot of others who are complaining about masks, Hakeem Jeffries, the speaker, the Democratic minority leader in the House, he's also yelling about them wearing masks. I don't remember these people complaining about students at Columbia University or other colleges wearing masks during pro-Palestinian or in some cases pro-Hamas demonstrations. So if you want to be taken seriously, you have to be consistent. You can't yell about ICE agents wearing masks if you're not complaining about others wearing masks to hide their identities. Congresswoman Jayapal, of Democrat from Washington State, ICE is a terrorist force. The question, John, is this kind of rhetoric creating an atmosphere in this country where people think they can pick up rocks and throw them at ICE agents in their cars, on the street, whatever? What should we make of the rhetoric? I know I don't like it. I condemn it. I don't blame Tim Walz for the person who tried to shoot an ICE agent, but I blame Tim Walz for creating an atmosphere that is not healthy in America.
Yeah, but before I answer, Rudy, I think one of your note cards is hitting up against the mic when you talk, so just kind of give you a heads up on that. But yeah, I think it's one thing to have legitimate concerns about how ICE is being used, whether it's including who's being rounded up and also the alligator Alcatraz stuff, among other things. But calling ICE a terrorist force obviously goes way too far. They are not terrorists. They are American law enforcement officers doing their job. People don't have to like the orders they're following, but encouraging people to obstruct ICE agents, as some of the Democrats have, and not many, some have, but it's both wrong and it's dangerous. A lot of people, including many on the right, like to argue that words don't matter. I've always believed they do matter. Words are not violence, but words can absolutely provoke violence. And I think that when you see Democratic leaders or any public officials stirring things up like this, they do run the danger. That they have public influence, and it can lead to bad things. Again, you're ultimately right. The person who commits the violence is the person who should have charges brought up against them. But I think that public officials do have to be responsible in situations like this, and when they're not, they should absolutely be called out for it.
And even if you can't connect any dots from the rhetoric to the violence, and we're never going to have hard evidence of that unless somebody says, "Yeah, I heard Tim Walz, and then I went out and shot somebody or tried to shoot somebody." The idea, this tossing around of the word Gestapo, is getting very old, and it speaks to ignorance of the Gestapo. ICE agents are law enforcement officers. One may not like the fact that they're wearing masks. In an ideal world, they wouldn't be wearing masks. But the idea that they're Gestapo, that's like calling Trump Hitler. It's exactly like calling Trump Hitler. And it backfires on the people throwing that kind of stupid language around. It's just stupid.
I agree, and it's one of those terms that it's provocative, but at the same time it loses its meaning because it's used all the time. We hear all these comparisons about what the Democrats are doing on abortion, or I'm sorry, with the Republicans, their stance on abortion. We've been hearing for years, this is just like The Handmaid's Tale. It's not anything like that. This is just another one where whenever you hear it, it basically just kind of dissolves the argument of the person that's just tossing it out there.
It would be nice to dismiss it as, well, we pay too much attention to radicals. Tim Walz is a governor of a state of the United States of America.
Yep.
The congresswoman from Washington State is a member of the House of Representatives. Come on, this is bad stuff. Now let's move on to a subject that I normally would have zero interest in, and that's the Epstein files, whether they exist or not, and whether it's going to break up the MAGA base. Is Donald Trump hiding something? Is he protecting his friends or even himself? Here's why it's interesting to me, John. MAGA, call it 25% of the people who voted for Donald Trump, they really would stick with him. And I mean this literally, if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. They'd find fault with the person he shot before they find fault with Donald Trump. Yet Donald Trump says, hey, let's move on. We've had enough of this Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And they're saying, no, we're not moving on. That to me is interesting. Is there something we should be pursuing in this area, John?
Well, so I have personally, I have never suggested, and I know you haven't either, Bernie, that Trump was involved with any of this hideous stuff that Jeffrey Epstein did. Despite they do have they had a relationship in the past. You know, both had described each other as very close friends. Trump had flown on Epstein's plane at least 7 times. And for all those, it's kind of interesting because this has been in the conspiracy on the MAGA right conspiracy side for a long time about what's going on with the government and Epstein. But it always gets me that, you know, all these conspiracy theorists who've been insisting that the deep state wanted Epstein silenced, and it should be it should be noted that if people really were serious about these theories, they take note that Epstein was arrested when Trump was president. He died in a cell when Trump was president. So it's always sort of interesting to see the conspiracy crowd kind of selectively pick and choose. But I have no sympathy. So right now we see all this soap opera stuff going on in the administration with Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. I have no sympathy for those who've been perpetuating this Epstein list over the years on the MAGA right. There is no evidence that there ever was a list or that Epstein was blackmailing powerful people. But what's interesting is it was people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Trump himself who played up this idea that the FBI and the deep state had this list, and the claim was used as an argument by these people, among others, of course, for why Trump needed to be voted back into office, so he could go and make this list public and expose the pedophiles and all this. And as many people have pointed out, Attorney General Pam Bondi just a few months ago said this list was on her desk, and that there was they had that silly stunt with the white trapper keepers that they handed out to MAGA influencers, and it's all crashing down now. You know, these same people are now not only saying that there's nothing to it, but acting like the people they previously duped into believing there was something here are kind of crazy. You know, they just want to say just drop it because they when it comes down to it, they have nothing to say about it. So it's the whole thing's dumb, but it's also self-invited.
Well, it's my educated, I'll call it an educated guess because I'm not a Washington correspondent, but Pam Bondi didn't go out and say there's no list without Donald Trump approving that statement in advance. He's calling the shots on this. But the MAGA base will not put Donald Trump, will not take rhetorical aim at Donald Trump. Pam Bondi is in the crosshairs, excuse my expression about crosshairs. I'm not trying to incite lunatics out there. Pam Bondi, David French, the columnist in the New York Times, said, we can see a consensus hardening against Bondi. She's the one that's going to become the villain in all of this. But I do find it interesting that if Donald Trump said jump to the MAGA base, they would say how high. But now he's saying jump, move on. And they're saying no. I don't know. There may be some significance in that down the road. I'm not sure yet.
I think that's something because, you know, I've been hearing about people abandoning Donald Trump, and I know you have too, Bernie, for a very long time. You know, I heard it after he mocked American POWs for their capture. I heard it after the Access Hollywood tape, after January 6th, after it turns out he had all this classified material in his bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. And I'm hearing it now. And I think in each of these cases, in the immediate aftermath, there has been this question, okay, this might actually be the one that does it. But I don't think it'll happen this time either. We've seen this, you know, become a very exciting topic for many on the right in recent days. But I think ultimately Trump will successfully change the subject. He'll throw people under the bus if needed. I don't know. Maybe that's Bondi. I don't know. And I think MAGA will collectively move on past this, like it usually happens.
The question is, if he doesn't throw anybody under the bus, Will they move on? They won't blame Donald. They won't blame
No.
the president. That's a given. They just are incapable of blaming him for anything, even though he's the one, but he's got to be the one behind it. Pam Bondi isn't going out and publicly saying, we investigated, there's no list. And no.
Well, I think Trump even blamed Obama the other day for all this somehow. I don't know. I
I
have
read,
no idea why, but
I read a headline about that and I found it so ludicrous. I didn't read the story. What was that about?
I don't. It was more like a social media thing on Truth Social, where he pinned it on. It wasn't just Obama. It was basically, and I don't think he even really explained it. He basically said they had concocted this, they had created this controversy, and it's one of those things that'll just get forgotten because that's what he does. He kind of swings at people. He was trying to kind of distract from this entire story the other day by going off on Rosie O'Donnell and talking about revoking her citizenship. None of it makes any sense. I think it's just sort of just swinging at anything to try and get press talking about something else at this point.
One unrelated or only slightly related thing about this. The press doesn't talk about this issue that I want to bring up. I brought it up, I think, once before a long time ago. How are these underage girls getting on airplanes, flying off to an island in the Caribbean without at least one of their parents saying, where do you think you're going? I just never understood that. Now, if they're runaways and Epstein and his girlfriend somehow snatched them up, that's one thing. But if they were living with their mother or mother and father, how do they get to an island, get on an airplane with a grown adult? I don't get that.
Because I haven't paid much attention to all of the story behind the Epstein stuff. I mean, honestly, Epstein was obviously a monster. I mean, we can all agree on that. I haven't followed the details of all these things closely enough to give you a good response on that, Bernie. I don't know what the family lives were like. I know that some of these witnesses, it was hard for them to come forward for obvious reasons. So, I just don't know the answer to that question, unfortunately.
Okay. Um, it does raise the question, and again, if this never came up, it would be fine with me. Is Donald Trump hiding something? Is he protecting somebody or some people? It makes you wonder. Okay, two more topics briefly, and then we'll call it a day. We're going to start running, John and I think we're going to start running a poll on our website. And one question I want to ask you, John, and I want to ask everybody out there, should Congress defund NPR and PBS? Now, I'll give you my answer now. I would say yes, but not for the usual reasons, because they've got a blatant liberal bias. They do, but that's not the reason. If NPR is so popular, especially with well-to-do people who live in the suburbs and all, and in urban progressives, then why do you need government money? Why do you need taxpayer money? If PBS and NPR are doing so well, run commercials like everybody else. It's a capitalistic country. If you're doing so well, do so well with advertising. I don't know why we're paying for NPR when there are a million radio stations and podcasts and YouTube. You don't need to fund NPR with taxpayer money or PBS. That's what I think. But if we do a poll, that'll be the first question, and we'd love to hear all of your responses to that.
Yeah, I've never had any problem with the idea of Congress defunding PBS and NPR. I think you might remember, Bernie, I think it was during the 2012 presidential election cycle that Mitt Romney made some comment about potentially doing that, and you had all these protesters out accusing of wanting to kill Elmo from Sesame Street. It was pretty silly, but yeah, I don't know what the argument for it, especially in the year 2025 of continuing to fund these organizations with tax dollars. It almost seems like the people that are that don't want that to happen, or sort of kind of arguing from a different era, when there wasn't many broadcast state networks out there.
Exactly. Exactly. This is 2025. You can get TV shows any place. You can get them streaming. You can get them on regular TV. You can set up a podcast. Whatever
And
you can get on NPR, you ought to be able to get someplace in the ecosystem, the media ecosystem, someplace. I'm not,
it sounds
I'm not
like
arguing that their work doesn't have great quality. I'm not arguing that. I'm not saying, well, they're not biased. They are biased. But I'm saying in a media landscape with so many choices, I don't see why taxpayers have to foot the bill for public broadcasting.
And it turns out, Bernie, I don't know if you've been following this in the past couple of days, but it probably is best that we don't fund Elmo. Have you have you read the story on that? I don't know. You probably haven't, but Elmo's been on Twitter for a long time, just putting out nice messages. And someone apparently hacked it the other day and put out a lot of anti-Semitic stuff. So that they're saying that's what happened, that there was a hack. I don't know, Bernie.
Right. Yeah, I did see that. Last question, and we can keep this one as long or as short as you want. Republicans are investigating Biden's doctor. This strikes me as dumb. Even if they find that Joe Biden didn't know his own name, didn't know that he was president, what are we going to do about it now? He's not in office, he's not running. I don't know that we need it, but the questions for his doctor, I have very specific issues with. If they want to ask him under oath, did anybody ask you to lie about the president's health? That's a legitimate question. But to ask him about the president's health, have they ever heard of HIPAA?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Their license, if they talk about a patient's health, would the congressman whose name escapes me right now, but he's always in the middle of some crazy BS, the head of the committee, you may know his name.
You have to narrow it down because there's a lot of crazy ones.
Right. Do congressmen who want the doctor to testify against Biden and tell us what he saw about Biden's health, how about we get their doctors in to tell us about their health? What did your doctor say on the last visit, Congressman? I mean, it's too dumb to even argue about. Doctors can't do that and should not be asked to reveal confidential information about their patient, even if the patient was the president of the United States of America.
Yeah, I don't actually have a problem with Republicans spending time with this broader topic, going after. I think it's good to air out who knew what, who was doing what, who was covering for Biden. And I think it's obviously a fair and good question to ask whether or not this doctor was asked to lie. The doctor had previously pointed out that and this is true. I mean, this is true of any White House doctors. They don't see the president every day, but he did witness him fumble his words, but he didn't, I guess, think there was much beyond that. It's who knows if that's true, but you're right. I think the HIPAA violation, when you're actually asking him specifically about health issues, the doctor himself, as opposed to like the White House press team or whatever, I think that is a problem. You know, the legal that could I think that could probably disbar the doctor if he answered questions about that. So, but I think the broader topic, I'm not one of those guys when there's something this egregious, like with what happened with Biden and the cover up. I'm not, one of those people who says, well, it's happened, it's in the past. I do think people, any kind of light we could shed on the topic. And I felt like this about January 6th. A lot of people said, well, it's over. What are you going to do now? Trump's gone from office. I was never one of those people. I think these are absolutely warrant investigations. But yeah, when it comes to asking a doctor about his patient's health situation, that's
Well,
that's not going to
they're inevitably partisan investigations. And you know what's going to happen next time around? A bunch of Democrats are going to say, what was Donald Trump thinking when he did this or that or the other thing? Did he lose his cognitive abilities? It never stops. And your position is reasonable. I'm not arguing against it. I'm saying for me, if they came out with a report today that said Biden, what are they going to tell me? They're going to tell me what I already know, that he had lost more than a few steps. Now, if they're going to tell me that A, B, C, and D covered for him and knew about it and lied, okay, I'd be interested in that, but I'm not sure about the importance besides it piquing my interest and satisfying my curiosity. Beyond that, I don't need it. It's not going to change anything for me. Anything else, John? We've been here about a half hour. People have busy schedules. I don't want to keep them any longer than we already have.
No, I will say, I think the smart play would have been for Biden to hire that doctor that Trump hired back in when he was running for president the first time, that guy with the long hair who let Trump write his own health assessment of himself. See, that would have been the way to go, I think, for Biden. That would have made things smoother for him. I'm joking.
I know. Anyway, we are in America way too partisan. It's not healthy. It's a bigger problem than climate change. It's an existential threat to our country. Every issue, people go to their respective corners and take sides. We try not to do that. And by the way, people who do, and I'm not going to dwell on this because I did last week and probably shouldn't have, people that are extreme are far more popular than people who are, well, on the one hand, we see this, but on the other hand, that side makes a lot of sense also. People don't want to hear that. Our audience does, and we appreciate it. But by and large, people want to hear Donald Trump is Hitler or Donald Trump is Mother Teresa in, second coming of Mother Teresa. All right. Anything else?
No, that's all I got, Bernie.
That's all I got too. Bye-bye.